Or say, hey guys, it's Klaus. Welcome back to another video. Let me introduce to you the Herney King, driving his T28 prototype. We're going to watch him have a great game here. And you know, guys, I don't know if it's just me or circumstances over the last little while or the last number of games I've played or the last experiences I've had just in life lately, but I get the feeling, or let me turn it around. Let me ask you guys the question. Do you guys feel sometimes that you're surrounded by just a sea of incompetent, clueless, utterly hopeless Muppets who have no clue what they're doing? Do you get that feeling? You know, and I thought about it. I really did. I thought about it a lot, trying to figure, is it just a string of bad luck? Had a few bad games in a row, or went to the bank and the grocery store and just ran into it was just a fluke. And after pondering for a while, I realized that the answer to that question, do you feel like you're surrounded by a total sea of clueless, utter, hopeless Muppets that have no clue what they're doing? The answer is yes, you probably are. And the more I play this game, the more I realize, let's make this positive. Let's make this positive. This is a simple game. And we pride ourselves here. You know, we just watch regular guys. An old Herney King here is a regular guy, no premium account. I don't like to always show the unicoms and get into if you go to this position and get hulled down and have these 17 crew skills and practice this with your clan 48 times, then you could 1 out of 150,000 times have a game result like this. Right? We just watch, and I know it's just a game. And sometimes everyone gets too serious. If you lose, so what? You know, it's just it's a bunch of pixel tanks on the screen. But some of the stuff that I witness and watch is so beyond being just it's just a game, that it's hard to understand what is going on. So I'm going to make this positive. I'm going to give you guys like kind of a list of this is a simple game and some of the simple things you have to know. And I'm flabbergasted that some people don't know. Like, okay, number one, and most people know this, is that in this game, you drive a tank, and you can make your tank move, and you can shoot. Right? Now, but don't laugh, because some people don't know that. Some people, they know they can move, or they know they can shoot, but they don't know that they could do both, or even both at the same time. And some tanks move fast, and some tanks move slow. Okay, so this one that we're watching now moves slow. One of the advantages of being in a tank that moves fast is that you can get away from the tanks that move slow. Okay, so number two here. All the players are divided up into two teams, and to make it easy, one team is one color and the other team is a different color. The object is to shoot all the tanks that are a different color than you until you kill all of them, and then you win. Or you can capture the base. There's two circles on the map, and you have to go to the circle that's not your color and sit in it for a minute and a half and capture it, and then you win. Now, in this game, the slow tank has come back to defend the base, and here's a fast tank. Now, he's a fast tank, so he can get away from the slow tank, as we learned in point one, but he chose not to. Okay, number three. Some tanks can see far, and some tanks can't. And so what you have to know from that one, basically the only thing you have to know from that point is that if you're in a tank that can't see very far, you shouldn't wander off on your own. You should kind of stick with your teammates and let them see things for you, because you can't. And if you have a tank that can see far, you should realize that, and then maybe go to places where you can try and see far and see the enemies for your team. The next point is this. Some tanks are big and some tanks are small. Usually the big ones are easier for the enemies to see, and the small ones are harder for the enemies to see. It's a little more complicated than that, in that if you're still, you are harder for the enemy to see than if you're moving. And if you're shooting, you're usually easy for the enemy to see. And if you put all of those together, you come up with the amazing fact that if you're small and you don't move, you're pretty difficult for the enemies to see. And this, of course, is related to point number one. All these points are related. The point where you can move and you can shoot, depending whether you're big or small. may affect where you decide to move to. And that's basically it. Those are the four basic points without studying Unicom tactics in detail. If you can at least balance those four complicated points in your mind at once, then the rest is basically repetition, playing on the maps over and over again, some luck, some RNG, all those other factors will shape the outcome. But hopefully, if you concentrate on those 4 points, and I maintain, I'm going out on a limb here, that if a player can remember those 4 things that I mentioned and let those 4 things shape the decisions they make in any given game or any given situation, then I would hazard to propose that that player will probably be pretty good. But the issue here, the thing that has captured my mind, that's causing me this consternation, is that I view hundreds and hundreds of replays that you guys send me, and I arrive at the conclusion that most players are not pretty good. And knowing how simple the 4 basic little things that maybe you want to consider while you're playing the game, it leads me to wonder, well, what's going on? And I know what some of you are thinking. Oh, come on, Klaus, you don't have to insult people. It's just a game. Some people just play for fun. There's some people that have bad computers and blah, 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 blah. I know. But I make it the point. I'm not insulting one person in particular, which is, there's a difference between insulting one person and, in general, insulting everyone. See, the latter is okay. It's... for example, let's say you're dealing with a moron yourself. In real life, you have a situation where someone does something really moronically stupid. There's 2 things you can do. You can look him in the eye and say, you know, that was really stupid. Are you a moron? And he'll immediately be offended and get defensive if you do something like that. And you've probably not done the right thing. You've not been a nice person by doing that. But if you look him in the eye, and instead of saying that, you say, you know, there's a lot of stupid morons in this world, aren't there? And that will be enough to confuse the person enough that their response will be more like they'll look back at you and they might fidget a little bit, start doing something with their hands, maybe look left, look right. The wrinkles will start forming on their forehead while they start thinking, what does he mean? And they may respond with something like, yeah, right. So you see, my point here is that you can make the same point by insulting, in general, a large group, as opposed to insulting the individual, and make the same point and not get in trouble. That's just an aside for you to remember in case you have some dealings with a moron. Okay, now let's get back to the game. I'm going to refer to point number 3 that I made earlier, and that was some tanks can see far, and some can't. So if you're driving a tank that can't see very far, it's probably a good idea to stay with your teammates, because if you venture off on your own, you won't be able to see very far. And that won't be good for you. So I'm watching the game, and I noticed that the KV2 has wandered off by himself now. There's only 3 of them left, and there's 4 enemies. Let's see what happens to him later. Okay. What was one of the other points? The number 1 is that some tanks can move and shoot, and some tanks are fast. There's a fast one. That's an E25. That is a fast tank. See? Now, if you're driving a fast tank, one of the strengths of a fast tank is that you can move fast. And that lets you have a higher chance of getting away from the tanks that move slow. And Herney King here is in a T28 prototype. It is slow. He's moving slowly. The E25 is moving fast, and he got away. You see? The E25 was thinking of point number 1. I'm not sure if he obviously hasn't watched this video yet. He hasn't been thinking of my points, but he used a strategy which is fundamental and related to one of the 4 points that I made. Oh, which just reminds me, I missed one point. Point number 5. Some tanks reload quickly, and some tanks reload slowly. And if you have a tank that reloads very slowly, you may want to be around your teammates so that while you're reloading, they can help you. Okay, so let's just watch the game here. Oh, and a whole bunch has happened here. Let's just pause it right there because we need to recap this. So the KV-2 that went down there is a slow tank that can't see far, that takes a long time to reload. So he decided to go way down there by himself, away from his teammates. Yeah, that didn't work out very well. Then the E-25 went down there. Now, he is a fast tank that can drive around quickly anywhere he wants and avoid being hit. But he stopped moving, which gave enough time for the T-28 prototype driven by Herney King, which is a slow tank, to lumber its way over and shoot the E-25. Okay, so there you go. A few of the factors that I listed would have been important for those players to consider before they made their moves, which unfortunately they did not, and they are now dead. Which leaves us now with Herney King in his T-28 prototype. And he correctly deduces that it is just him versus 2 players, and he is in a slow tank, so there's no time to waste. He has to head towards the enemy base and try and find them and win the game by either killing them because they're a different color or capturing that base. Meanwhile, the KV-2 who has just died types in chat, T-28, thank no help, idiots! Because remember, he was in one of those tanks that was slow, big, doesn't see very far, and takes a long time to reload. So, of course, his strategy was to venture off on his own and get surrounded and get killed. Just like this artillery player right there, who is also driving a tank that cannot see very far. And according to my point number 3, if you'll remember, if you're in a tank that can't see very far, it's probably not a good idea to drive around looking for people. Because you can't see very far. Is it too complicated? Am I making this too complicated than it needs to be? I mean, am I making any sense? It's like the guy that you go out to lunch with, you know, and it's kind of the weird friend that you have the uneasy feeling being around, and when you're out to lunch, you hope he orders the soup so that they just give him a spoon. Because, you know, if he orders the steak, he's going to have a knife, and you're sitting there beside him, and it just makes the hair on the back of your neck stick up, and you feel uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? Like when the game starts, when you actually start playing a game here and you're just loading in, do you have that feeling that you kind of, you think that all of your teammates are the type of people that, like if you went out to lunch with them, you would hope that they order soup? You know what I'm saying? Okay, so let's get back to the game here. Now his teammate is typing in chat for him to cap. And that's probably a good idea. He's got a little under 3 minutes left now. And he is slow. And it takes 1.5 minutes to cap. So, and this is probably, I'm looking at all the 5 rules. You can win the game by entering that base and sitting there for 1 minute and 30 seconds. He is driving a slow tank, so it probably would be difficult to drive around looking for the last enemy. The last enemy cannot see very far. So therefore, if he sits in the cap, that enemy will have to get close, which will allow him to see the enemy and shoot him. So this is a good strategy. He's getting in the cap. And now, all he has to do is sit here for 1 minute and 30 seconds, and he'll win. So here he goes. He's going to win the game. He's been in the cap now for 10 seconds. Oh, and the enemy has started capping. But that's okay, because the way the game works is once you have captured the base, the game continues for 5 more seconds. And if the enemy captures the base in that time, it ends up being a draw. But he was 10 seconds ahead, so he's decided. Let's review some of the factors I have here. He is in a slow tank, which means he doesn't travel quickly. And one of the other points here was that you can win the game by capturing the base, which takes 1 minute and 30 seconds, which he would have done. He would have done that 10 seconds faster than the enemy. So knowing all that, he's decided to drive across the map towards the enemy who's capturing his base. Let's see what happens here. Now, well, let's look at some of my points here. The enemy is in a small tank. It's fairly small. And he doesn't want anyone to see him. So he will probably be sitting still somewhere in that base in his small tank, because one of the factors is if you're still, you're harder to see than if you're moving or shooting. So really, Herney King, you have no chance now. You're going to run out of time. Unless the enemy's driving around like a muppet, scurrying around, doing circles in the base, wondering when he can go out to lunch and order soup, I think is what's on his mind. And thus ends your lesson for today. And if you could try and think of those, was it 4 or 5 simple points that I made while you're playing, try and consider those things. I think it'll help you. And what's the takeaway? I'm trying to wrap it up here. I think the moral of the story, guys, the real essence here is that I think you should really think twice before you, say, go out to lunch with someone who plays World of Tanks. Or if you do, just make sure that they order the soup.